Afternoon, everybody. Apologies for the technical hitch. Never worked with animals, dogs, people, and the Zoom cameras. Right, John Tucker, Woodland Trust. This is going to be a whistle-stop tour through woodland creation. It's not an exhaustive list at all, but there are 5 things that I'm going to look at that I think people need to consider if they're thinking about creating new woodland. So the first one is, why are you doing it? What are your objectives? You've got to be really clear about your objectives right from the start. Second thing is assessing the site that you're thinking of creating that woodland on. Is it actually capable of delivering those objectives that you want to achieve? Thirdly, if the site is capable, what sort of systems might you implement on that site to try and achieve those objectives in the longer term? Fourthly, we'll look at permissions, planning and finance. And then finally, ongoing management and maintenance. Geraint's already touched on this, but you can never say enough about this subject. So first of all, let's think about objectives. Geraint sort of touched on this. I'll just go into this in a little bit more detail. So historically, people will have created woodlands for timber, for biomass, for wood fuel, for shooting, sporting interest, for example, or for wildlife. In the last 5 or 10 years, it's been great to see how carbon has come to the fore, and it's been really good to see Forestry Commission launch their new woodland carbon guarantee, which is going to help get some long-term income streams coming into new woodland creation. Payments for up to 35 years ahead, which is fantastic. A little bit more of that later. But this series of webinars that we've been engaged with here have also looked at a wider range of benefits that trees and woods can deliver. Water is a case in point. So the UK loses 2.9 million tonnes of topsoil annually. A lot of that ends up in our watercourses and reservoirs, and it's a cost to clean, and it's a cost to the landowner that's losing it. Trees and woods in the right place can help alleviate that, and water companies are beginning to realise that greener solutions to this problem can be as cost effective as concrete solutions, and again, potential income streams to landowners. Bottom right, it's also worth thinking about the shade value that trees and woods can provide as well. Species such as salmon and trout are very temperature dependent and could be really adversely affected in a warming climate. Just to finish up on the benefits, it's worth mentioning a whole range of other things as well. If we think about a warming climate, what are the impacts going to be on milk yields of dairy cattle, for example, and where might infield trees and woodlands help provide some shade? Winter shelter for outdoor lambing in that first 48 hours when the lambs are born, incredibly important. We're also starting to look back at some of the stuff that our forefathers knew about the medicinal and nutritional value of tree fodder. We're working with the likes of the Nottingham Vet School on this, looking at things like the amount of cobalt and other trace elements that species like willow might provide. The egg box is an example of a diversification project. We've been working with Sainsbury's on the woodland egg range for probably 12 years or more. It's now a multi-million pound product line. And the little oak tree you can see is oak. You may not realise that most of the truffles in the world actually come from cultivated woodlands rather than more natural woodlands. We've cultivated some of our oaks with truffles. We're still waiting for the results. So moving on then, you've got your objectives, you need to start thinking about the site, and a whole range of attributes of that site are going to determine what you can do and how successful you're going to be. And I've listed them all there. Now, there are lots of websites that you can go to start to get that information. The Land app is a good example, Forestry Commission Land Information Search, and magic.gov.uk. Some of them are less easy to sort of find information on and require more thought, particularly things about landscape character, scale, and sense of place. The next couple of slides are courtesy of Richard Hellier from Forestry Commission. So you start to bring that information together into a site appraisal plan. This is for a large productive upland forest. So it's starting to bring together the attributes of that landscape. So important habitats that you don't want to plant on, access points, archaeology, landscape, rivers, views, etc. So trying to bring together all those attributes into an easily visible plan. From that, you move on to the design phase then, design concept plans. And it's useful if you can do not just one concept, so you've got everything fixed, but a few options for yourself. So here you can see the number one area is the extensive coniferous forest, and then you've got broadleaf forest to help complement with other habitats and to bring it into the landscape, and then your open habitats as well. So you're already started through that concept discussion and planning, thinking about the systems that you're going to use to try to implement your scheme. So many and varied can be depending on what your objectives are. So this is a stock farm in Yorkshire, quite exposed. He wanted to try and introduce more shelter onto his farm, but also to extend an informal shoot on the farm. So he's concentrated on hedges, new hedges, and relatively small shelter belts and copses. We'll come back to this again later. And again, you don't need massive areas of land to achieve your objectives. This is the site in the Forest of Bowland in Lancashire. It's an intensive dairy farm, and there were real problems, as you can see, on the banks with erosion, but also nitrate runoff. So a relatively small area on either side of the river was fenced, trees planted, and you can see 8 years hence down the road, the improvements certainly to the water quality and to the erosion. This is an important salmon river, and there's been noticeable improvements over those years. Now, you can, of course, do things at a much bigger scale. This is up in Cumbria. You can see the M6 in the background, not far from T-Bay. This was a soil erosion alleviation scheme, slowing the water flow, but also with a strong biodiversity element to it. So a lot of the planting here is native broadleaf, but you can also have very extensive coniferous planting. This is a site, Jarrah Farm, in the Scottish lowlands. That's Falkirk in the background. And it's extensive conifer dominated by Sitka spruce, but there are broadleaf plantings, particularly in the lower levels, more closely to the communities. There's been a lot of talk about agroforestry systems in recent years as well. This is, I suppose, at the extreme end of that. This is Stephen Briggs near Peterborough. Stephen's got strips of arable, approximately 34 to 36 metres wide, and then rows of apple trees planted on either side of those strips. He's still able, as you can see here, to have those combinable crops, but he's got an additional crop in terms of the fruit, which he sells at his farm shop, and he's also got significant improvement in his soil erosion problems. This is a more juvenile agroforestry scheme, similar to Stevens, the Renaissance up in Perth. That's the River Tay in the background. Again, fruit-based, with the produce going through a local distillery. But agroforestry can also mean just increasing hedges around the farm. This is in mid-Wales. Again, exposure, wanted to try and limit that for his outdoor lambing. And it could be just individual trees along the roadside. This is on grade 1-2 soils up in Norfolk, and the landowner particularly wanted to leave a legacy in the landscape. So fourthly then, just moving on to permissions, planning and finance. If you're planning anything of any scale, it's really useful to talk to your Forestry Commission office or go on to the Woodland Creation Hub that they have right at the start to find out as much information as possible. The EIA legislation was changed in 2017, and If you're in what's designated a sensitive area in England, any woodland creation, be that half a hectare, you will need to go through an EIA inquiry form and full screening. If you're in a less sensitive area, then the threshold is 2 hectares or more. So it's worth having a conversation with them right at the start to find out where you stand. Planning grants may be available to help you with your planning. So there's up to £1,000 for the first desktop stage. If you get through that stage, there's up to £30,000 available to help you plan after that in a second phase. It's always important to get professional advice to help you. I'm a chartered forester. If you go onto the Chartered Foresters website, there's a great list of consultants there. But also talk to neighbours at an early stage. Talk to local interest groups who can have really good information about other habitats and local interest in terms of history. Key thing is give yourself time. There's quite a crowded grant landscape out there. There's some good finance available. Countryside stewardship can cover up to 80% of your initial capital costs. There are schemes which will give you 100% of that cost. Again, go online to the Forestry Commission Hub and talk to your local Forestry Commission officers. If those schemes aren't suitable to you, if you're thinking about planting only a small area, then the Woodland Trust have a Moorwood scheme, which looks at things in the sort of range of about half a hectare up to 3 hectares. The website is there, or talk to us if you need more information. So just to finish up then, Geraint's mentioned this, you can't mention the need for management and maintenance too often. So we've all seen, unfortunately, schemes like this, tubes left on, constricting growth, tubes not straightened all over the place. The bottom right one is a Woodland Trust site where we've tried to combine shelters with sheep, and it's a nightmare because the sheep love rubbing their bottoms up against those stakes. You're wasting your investment if you're not going to put aside finance to look after what you do. If you do look after it, you'll get results like this. So top right is the farm in Yorkshire that I talked about. These trees are only 11 years old. He's high pruned them, brushed them. He's already started taking firewood thinnings from them, and they're forming part of his shoot. And then bottom left, cricketback willow, down near me in Sussex. Some of the trees look a bit wonky in the picture, but they've all been high pruned. These trees in year 17, 18, probably 350 to 400 pounds each. So it just shows the benefits of looking after what you do. That's it from me. Thank you very much.